Two big Supreme Court rulings this morning, and believe it or not, despite the hype and the howls of protest, the republic still stands. One dealt a blow to labor unions. We're going to get to that in a bit. But first, to the highly anticipated Hobby Lobby verdict, which dealt a blow to Obamacare. The arts and crafts change directly challenged the mandate that employers provide free coverage for 4 particular contraceptives, even if it violates the company's religious beliefs. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that certain for-profit businesses can opt out. Here's a reaction from both sides.
Today's decision is a landmark decision for religious freedom. The Supreme Court recognized that American families do not lose their fundamental rights when they open a family business. Women's voices are heard, standing up for religious freedom. This case is about the freedoms of all Americans, women and men, and it's something that all Americans should celebrate today.
I'm disturbed that 5 male Supreme Court justices would essentially state in a ruling that discrimination against women specifically is not really discrimination in this country.
No comment on the ruling today directly from President Obama, but his spokesperson offered this.
There are now a group of women of an indeterminate size who no longer have access to free contraceptive coverage simply because of some religious views that are held not by them necessarily, but by their bosses. We disagree, and the constitutional lawyer in the Oval Office disagrees with that conclusion from the Supreme Court.
The White House says that it is considering a range of options available to the president that he could take after this decision. We have Kimberly Guilfoyle here today.
Boo.
So you're gonna set the stage for us because it's slightly complicated, but you can.
It is, but everyone should understand from the outset that this is a very narrowly tailored decision. That is the main point here. It applies specifically to the case at hand, and so what that means is this is going to generate other cases that are similarly situated because they will try to get different groups, depending on their viewpoints, get the court to expand the ruling further than they did here in this particular case. So I like the way that the court carefully tailored it. They did this so they'd be able to stand on strong legal ground and say that this only concerns a contraceptive mandate. So it's not something that's going to say that all insurance coverage mandates work, like vaccinations, blood transfusions, everything like that. Those won't necessarily fail if they conflict with an employer's, their background for their employees of what they can receive or what they can't. So here it's just dealing with Greg's favorite word, the abortifacients, and whether or not those can be covered.
This was definitely seen, Eric, as a win by people who, there were chants outside of Hobby Lobby wins. There are a lot of people that are upset about it. But if you go back to 1993 with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that was a bipartisan bill that was passed. It's really that was the question here. And then apparently they've changed their minds, a lot of the Democrats, and they were decrying it as a vicious attack against women by the court.
It's kind of interesting. Also interesting that Josh Earnest says now women won't have access to contraceptives. Boy, talk about not being earnest. That there could be one of the least earnest things Josh Earnest has ever said. Victory for constitutionalists, a victory for religious freedoms. People believe that First Amendment rights of the corporation and the individual are protected, and a victory for common sense. I mean, basically, the Obamacare theory is abortion pills are preventative medicine. When I say abortion pills, I mean the 4. The abortifacients, right? This is what Hobby Lobby said. We're okay with the 16. We provide 16, but the 4 that would actually abort a fetus after it's been brought into life, they said they had a problem with those. So they said those abortifacients, Obamacare calls those preventive. So Hobby Lobby pushed back on that, but the fight was that employers still should provide that. So
right. So the government,
a lot of people who follow the Constitution believe that was a win.
The government that is trying to force people, Bob, of people of faith to abandon their principles, was delivered a brushback pitch by the justices today.
Nice sports analogy.
Well, then I don't know who's taking into account the 13,000 people that work for them. If you,
I think Hobby Lobby is.
If 2 people start a business who are Christian Scientists, and they grow it into a 10 or 15,000 person employee company, Does that mean, as Christian Scientists believe, you can't be bled? You can't take your kid to a hospital?
I think that Kimberly was just explaining to you that no, that is not the case.
No, it's not.
What is the case then? You said if they bring that case in front of...
Okay, but here, what I'm saying is that others might try to bring another case to say, listen, will you expand it to this? But the court said, again, this applies to closely held corporations like Hobby Lobby. So it's narrowly specified as to that, to that type of corporation, which is very different than a different type, publicly held, etc. But let me tell you something else. They also said, very important, there are viable alternatives, and that's what Hobby Lobby maintained the whole time. Look, they can go out, get something else. This is what we're providing. We're certainly not putting a blanket restriction or an X on, contraceptives or anything like that. So they weren't overbroad in what they chose to exclude, which is why this case was the best one to bring forward and why everybody predicted that it would have this outcome.
So in other words, for-profit corporations can bring their religious views into their business and affect everybody who works for them.
Closely held.
Closely held.
There is specific. Let's get Greg in here, because one of the things that you dislike the most is fake outrage, and there was plenty of it today, with people suggesting that the Republic was going to end.
Well, no, there are actually people that were suggesting burning down Hobby Lobby buildings. The meltdown made Chernobyl look like a teapot. It's like they banned Pilates or something. They were comparing a narrow ruling to Sharia law. Some people on Twitter were. Feminists used to reject the notion of hysteria as an attack on women. Now they embrace hysteria. The media, meanwhile, is framing this as religion versus the individual. That's not the case. It's the individual versus government. They are camouflaging coercion as choice. It's not about religion at all. It's about a private enterprise being told what to do by the government. But the media likes to portray it as right-wing Christians versus progressive women who are losing their rights. You can still get your pills. The government will pay for those pills, and you don't even care about Hobby Lobby. You don't even shop there. This outrage is a symptom of a dependent society where no demand can be denied. We're creating a nation of entitled bots, and they screech and they yell when they can't get your way. Well, get this. You can't get your way every time, and it's called arts and crafts. It's Hobby Lobby. It's about arts and crafts. It's not about abortion pills.
But it is about religion. It isn't about government. It's about religion.
And whether you have the freedom of it.
Now, I have a right, I think, to have my Viagra pills covered. They were not covered under this bill.
But why not? Because that's a health concern for you.
Exactly right. I think, at $500 for 15 of them, that's pretty expensive.
And that's cost prohibitive.
You need a generic.
That's not like birth control pills, which would be $70 a month. So you're paying 5 to 6 times more for something. But the problem is your Democratic Party doesn't care about you because you don't form the base. You're not a feminist.
Well,
let me just mention.
Not, I think.
Let me just mention something else. Greg said that you can't always get what you want. And President Obama, one of the reasons, Eric, he's in this position is because instead of the Congress writing this into the law, they had the Health and Human Services Department write it as part of a rule. So executive action is not as strong as congressional action. And maybe the president thought that he had to do this on his own because he thinks Congress doesn't do enough. But that's one of the reasons they're in this position. So the answer by the government is to say, well, since we got this pushback, then the president, again, will not try to ask Congress to fix it. He's going to try to do it on his own through executive action.
Yeah, isn't that amazing that the White House this afternoon said the president may address this through executive? I mean, executive action, correct me if I'm wrong, used to be things like let's declare, I don't know, next Tuesday National Donut Day or this, someone important stature died and we'll fly the flags at half-mast. Now it's like we're going to revamp the whole economic system. We're going to revamp, how corporations are treated, who gets religious freedom and who doesn't. I think it's really ridiculous that President Obama, and we're going to talk about later, but he's going to do that with immigration too. I mean, what
president doesn't use executive action?
I think that there is a lot of presidents do, but I do think that there is a responsibility on behalf of the executive, whoever it is in office, to craft executive actions that can actually hold up in court.
Right.
And when they do not, to accept that and say, okay, we disagree with the ruling, but we accept it because the Supreme Court has spoken. And Kimberly, I want to get your take on this other thing, because the last day of a Supreme Court session is always a fire drill for the White House because there were lots of decisions. And before we go, I just want to touch base on this other one, which is the Supreme Court, again, ruling 5-4 about public sector unions. And in Illinois, this is about home health care workers and whether or not they were going to be compelled to have to give a fee to the unions. The healthcare workers said they didn't want to, and the union said, well, then we don't have to represent you when we do contracts. The Supreme Court said we're going to agree with the healthcare workers.
Yeah, I
have that right?
Yeah, you got it right exactly. I mean, we're just going to send you to the Supreme Court and you hang out with Shannon Bream. You're doing such a good job, and she did a great job by today. So, yes, I think this is something that obviously the unions aren't going to be too happy about, in my opinion, you know, but this has been, I think, a number of very consistent rulings coming out of the court in terms of what they've been doing. If you see this, it's been kind of a steady stream here of consistency, because the one-off was Obamacare, right?
A big one.
That surprised everybody. It was just like shocking. Nobody kind of really saw that coming. But with respect to what they did today, I think it was in good keeping with sticking with the Constitution, with really observing the laws and following them.
So the home health care workers could take advantage of what the unions negotiate, both in terms of fees and other benefits, and yet they don't have to join the union or pay into the union.
That's true.
So as far as I'm concerned, if you're a home health care worker, screw you. You go out there and get whatever you can get in the free market.
Or there's no reason to be in the union.
Well, then why ride on the backs of the union? Why ride on the backs of the union?
They don't want to be in the union.
They don't want.
But they ride on the backs of them.
They don't want to ride on the backs of anybody.
They're getting the same. They get the same benefits that the union negotiated.
Well, I think also because the unions typically, about 98%, Greg, of the union fees, if they make political donations, go to Democrats.
Yeah, that's why the Dems are upset, because this is how you mug people and you get the loot, you give it to the Democrats. That's all it's about. It would be awesome to be a Democrat. If nobody wants to give you their money, you just take it from them.
Can I point one thing out?
There's just more autonomy here.
Let this woman and let the rest of them go and work for themselves.
That's what everybody's wanted, Bob.
Okay, then they don't ask for the same benefits the unions get.
Why aren't they entitled? They should be able to ask.
They negotiated fine.
Bob, you want to let the unions play their little union game? Go and knock yourself out, but then start taxing them, because they have no reason to be tax exempt under 501c4, but they get the 501c4 tax exemption, and meanwhile
I can give you a number of organizations on the right to fit that.
They are political groups. They're 98%, 96, whatever percent is going to a Democrat Party. That's more a super PAC than
then
well, it is. Maybe people don't want to be subjected to that.
Don't join the union if you don't want to do that, but don't ride on their backs and take their benefits.
But Bob, why are they not equally entitled to get good benefits as workers?
Because they don't sit at the table and negotiate.
My point is, unless you subject yourself to the union shakedown, then you're not entitled to get good benefits and a good wage.
Get all the benefits you can get, negotiate them on your own. Go on your own and negotiate.
No, that's a bully tactic.
It's saying if you're not participating in the economy, like paying your taxes, participating in government, then you shouldn't get government services.
No, it's that. I'm just saying, if you're not willing to join collectively to negotiate your benefits and your salary, then go do it yourself.
Right.
Go do it in your living room and see if you can get yourself those kind of monies.
And the union is really amenable to people not being in their union. They're so nice about that.
Well, if you're not in the union, then you have to pay the fee, which also goes to the union.
Exactly.
Okay. The Supreme Court, always interesting, and the last stop on the line. I think